Tonight's Late Show is dedicated to one of the leading lights of the opera world, Jessie Norman. She'll be talking to the General Director of the Royal Opera House, Jeremy Isaacs, at 11:30.
The second programme in the How Green series takes us onto the A55 expressway across North Wales, where improvements are opening up rural areas to the industrial northwest of England. Wildlife and green areas are under threat, but so too are Welsh-speaking communities, as increasing numbers of commuters search for homes in Gwynedd.
They're looking at houses for professional people who will use the road as a commuter road. These people won't be contributing anything to their local community.
The Real Price of Progress, A Road to Opportunity, Thursday at 8, BBC Wales on 2.
Now on BBC Wales on 2, it's time for a detailed look at the day's news and events with Peter Snow in Newsnight.
We will potentially replace the Cold War with the trade war. And if we have a trade war, we don't have to go back too far in history to see what that leads to. A lot of uncertainty.
Good evening. America's Vice President Dan Quayle warns what will happen if the current world trade talks break down. But he hastens to deny the impression he seemed to have given earlier that failure could lead to America reconsidering its commitment to the defense of Europe. In a wide-ranging interview with Newsnight, he talks tough about Saddam and Gaddafi, but he admits it's an awkward job being vice president. Also tonight, health is back at the centre of the pre-election campaign. We examine the way budget-holding doctors in Hertfordshire are already changing the face of healthcare and creating what is beginning to look to some like a two-tier NHS. The Health Minister, Virginia Bottomley, and her Labour shadow, Harriet Harman, are with me to discuss the effects of the change. And scientists say they're close to unlocking the secret of why we age, wither and die. Could the countdown to death eventually be slowed down or even stopped? But first, the end game in the world trade negotiations under the GATT, the Geneva Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, is almost as rowdy a business as the pre-election campaign here at home. Already, President Bush has accused Europe of trying to set up an iron curtain of protection, and transatlantic relations are more venomous than they've been for some time. The 5-year-old trade negotiations reach their climax just as America throws itself into the presidential election. And American politicians, including Vice President Dan Quayle, were at a conference in Munich yesterday at which harsh words were said not just about the trade talks, but about America's readiness to continue defending Europe. Even the Vice President himself was thought by some Europeans there to have hinted that America would reconsider its troop commitment to NATO if the trade talks collapsed. What Mr. Quayle actually said at the conference was that security and trade were linked. He said the success of the GATT talks was critical to the security of Europe.
Friends, we have got to get on with it. We have to conclude the Uruguay round of this GATT negotiation.
Some of his Republican colleagues went further. They questioned whether there was now any need for America to defend Europe at all. What mattered, they said, was trade.
It appears that trade may be a far more significant issue than NATO itself.
The troops are, of course, already going home. In the last few weeks, America's so-called Spearhead, 3rd Armoured Division, has lowered its flag and bowed out. President Bush wants to halve the 300,000 troops who were in Europe little more than a year ago. But some, even in his own party, were telling the weekend conference that they would cut far deeper.
There's a lot of talk in Congress about 50 or 60,000 as our level, and we'll probably end up with a forward group of maybe 30 to 50,000 troops in Europe permanently, but the days of big American presence is over.
Are you ready for a president who will declare a peace dividend
Some Democrats questioned the commitment altogether. Tom Harkin, campaigning in Iowa for tonight's caucuses, has told audiences there that if people reckon Europe is already rich and strong enough to look after itself, then they should vote for him.
I'm Tom Harkin and I'm running for president.
More immediately threatening than Mr. Harkin is the prospect of America playing extra tough in the GATT trade negotiations, which resume in the next few days. The sticking point is food. Both Europe and the United States want more access for farm products like wheat, but each accuses the other of protecting its farmers. Tempers are frayed, and the temptation for Bush and Quayle to score points in the election race may have been behind the Vice President's apparent hint that defense commitments could be linked to a deal on trade.
If the trade war that is developing over the GATT thing goes on, there's going to be a lot of hard feelings, and American taxpayers really want the trade thing to go forward, the GATT agreement. If it doesn't, I could see the time that there could be a total pullout of U.S. troops.
I certainly agree there is a danger of any failure to achieve settlement in GATT leading to a rise in protectionism both in America and probably in Europe and elsewhere. And that's a great danger, and anything that can be done to alert people to that danger and make us aware of the need for an early settlement is important. But I'm not sure that it's particularly helpful to link security and trade matters, especially if it antagonises the very people in Europe who are least eager for a settlement.
Today's send-off for the first American consignment of relief for Russia highlights another bit of North Atlantic friction. Germany has already sent 300 plane loads, and Europeans like the German Foreign Minister Mr. Genscher believe that James Baker's launch in Frankfurt this morning of what he calls Operation Provide Hope is an attempt to reassert American leadership in an area in which Europe is already way out in front. But all this is a long way from the New Hampshire primary campaign, where foreign commitments of any kind don't score many points with the voters. This is a battle on the economy, in which George Bush is fighting off a harsh attack from his own right, which accuses him of breaking promises.
It was not some liberal Democrat who declared, "Read my lips, no new taxes," and then broke his word to cut a seedy backroom deal with the big spenders on Capitol Hill.
Dan Quayle has done his bit of tub-thumping too, and already people are looking at him in a new light. Not exactly as a political heavyweight, but what weight he has, he's starting to throw around.